I think sometimes we spend too much money and time on those quick fix things like, just wine and coffee and fun and lavish things when our health and reconnecting to the environment are so important. And, if we're not going to make those small sacrifices and changes, then we've got to stop complaining about the price of iceberg lettuce.
Today on Dirty Linen, we continue to talk about supply chains, costs, all those juicy things that make such a difference in our lives. We're going to catch up today with an old mate of Dirty Linen. Simone Watts is a farmer. She is chef at the to-be-built Barragunda on the Mornington Peninsula. And I think she's got a bit of a unique perspective on this whole shebang, coming at the supply of food, the cooking of food, the serving of food to people from all different angles. Simone, welcome back to Dirty Linen.
Hi, Dani. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really good to have you here, and thank you for being chilly in winter and nevertheless taking the time to sit still and have a chat. I really appreciate it. Tell us how you see things at the moment. We're hearing so much about costs, how difficult it is for hospitality, also for consumers. Where do you sit on all of this?
Yeah, look, to be honest, I think I'm not as surprised as a lot of people seem to be. And I kind of feel like people are leaning into, I don't want to say blaming, but it seems to be the case a lot of the time of, the last couple of years and the extreme weather conditions that we've been having. And people are sort of, seemingly surprised that we're in this state that we're in, when the reality is, like, the fragility of the food systems and the dependency that we've had on mass commercial farming has been around for a really long time. And I think, these cracks have been forming and getting deeper and deeper. And, maybe COVID was the icing on the cake. Maybe that's the wrong analogy, a pretty crappy, dry, crumbly cake. But I think that, unless we take a really hard look at what we've been doing for a long time, and if we don't take that time to reconnect with communities, with our farms and country, then, this is not going, this isn't something that's just happening this season and that's suddenly going to, get better in next season, by next season, or by the end of the year, unless we really start to make some serious changes and look at the mistakes that we've been making.
There is such sort of forward impetus and growth impetus in our society. And, it's obviously got us into all sorts of difficulties, existential ones, really. Where do you, how do we turn this around? The scale of it seems overwhelming.
Oh, yeah, look, it's really daunting. And, I think we can look at this from two different angles. And one is from, I guess, the general consumer, and one is from the industry point of view. If you start looking from the general consumer point of view, and especially, I guess, city-based people, it's not always the case, but ultimately, by design, cities are not sustainable. You're looking at a large population of people that are 100% dependent on surrounding rural areas for their food supply. And as cities grow and population grows, we see more and more native forest destroyed, and the need to develop agriculture on land that isn't overly arable, which ends up meaning heavy tilling, synthetic fertilizers, destroying trees on water banks, which then leads to erosion, which leads to floods, which we're seen a lot of this year. And in those scenarios, when you're looking at farms nearby that have mass monocrops that are completely flattened, that's passed on to supply chains of prices being pushed up. But we always blame that on the immediate thing that's happened, not, the decades of poor colonized land that has happened before that has got us to this. So, I think especially in an urban environment, we need to start thinking outside of the box of how we can produce more food closer to the city and in the city. People like Yaus that did Future Food have given amazing examples of things that you can do within your home. Maybe some of them are, not everyone's going to have mushrooms growing in their shower as much as I would I would love to have that. I think growing our own food in a city environment has to start being at the forefront of what we're thinking about.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And anyone who hasn't listened to our podcast with Joe Barrett about Future Food System, search that one up. It is really incredible to think about housing in a different way, which Jostbakker did with Future Food System, currently being dismantled in Federation Square in Melbourne. But it's been an incredible showcase of a building that grows food. So every part of the building supports this idea, this ecosystem idea where it, nothing is wasted. All the waste goes into creating energy, all kinds of different foods, a really remarkable array, everything from, insects to mushrooms, as you say, Simone, but also chickens and fish are grown in this one house. I think, the great thing about speaking to people like yourself and like Joost and like Joe Barrett is this idea of this sense of possibility. It also makes me think of another great chat we had on this podcast with Shashi Singh, not far from you, at Avani Winery. And just the way that she spoke about coming to that winery in Red Hill and starting to feed the soil and work towards a biodynamic style of viticulture, and just how welcome the land made her feel, how the insects started speaking to her, fruit started to grow on the trees. It gave me a sense of, we're not that far from big change if we want to make it.
No. Look, Shashi's connection to her particular place down here reminds me of that need to be very connected to country and to your particular terroir that you're growing in. She came to an area that predominantly grows Chardonnay and Pinot, and for her that wasn't working, and she put in her Syrah grapes, and they boomed and make the most beautiful Syrah that the peninsula has seen. But that's only because she stopped and listened to her surroundings. And I think that's incredibly important, and sometimes a little bit harder in an urban environment to do. If you're in a backyard and four walls around you to feel that connection, but it's quite easy to do that if you do start growing some of your own things. You have that pride for your food, exactly where it's coming from, and it gives, I think, a great sense of purpose as well. But I think, I always push with people that it's not that hard, and it's very inexpensive. We're seeing the lettuce fiasco that seems to be on headlines everywhere at the moment. But I'll probably regret doing this because it's my favorite kind of lettuce and it'll probably sell out after this. But down here we've got a beautiful seed producer called Transition Farm. Peter and Robin run the farm, and they grow they produce biodynamic seed. And I think, in this consumer world, we've been driven to just mass identities of overbred varieties, things like iceberg lettuce and stuff like that. But, people forget that there's hundreds and thousands of beautiful heirloom varieties, and they produce a lettuce called Tom Thumb lettuce, which only takes 36 days to grow from seed to plate. Now, most iceberg lettuces take about 3 months, so 90 to 120 days to grow from seed to being on your table, which, when you think about it, something that's taken 3 to 4 months to grow, $10 probably really isn't that much. But so these little Tom Thumb lettuces only take 36 days. You can go onto their website. You can buy 250 seeds for $4.95. That's 250 heads of lettuce for $5 that you can have in your backyard. And if you really wanted to, you could then let one go to flower, which will then turn to seed, collect your own seed, and you'll never have to buy lettuce ever again.
Yeah, I mean, that is really extraordinary. That's some great maths. Yeah, really quite. It's really not hard. You can take those seeds, you can throw them in, a $5 bag of Bunnings potting mix, put a little bit of soil on top and water it, and you will have lettuce. There'll be no waste. You can just pick the leaves you need, because everyone knows when you buy an iceberg lettuce, half of it sits in the bottom of the fridge and starts to look skanky, and you just feel sorry for it until you eventually hide it in the compost with a lot of shame. Oh my God, iceberg shame. I've so been there.
Yeah. Yeah.
What kinds of things have you learnt, Simone, from the farming that you've been doing at Barragunda?
Well, I think, it started with, because how long sort of the restaurant was taking to get across the line with council approval, I just started growing some veg to start working the soil and getting the soil health up. But from there, it went on to growing a lot of produce for the pop-up events that I was doing. And I realized that there was a lot to learn with timing. Things take a lot longer than you think, which for me has probably been the biggest learning curve for empathy for farmers, of like what I was just saying with, lettuce and brassicas taking, 3 to 4 months to grow. Things like broccoli can be in the ground for 5 or 6 months before you get ahead. So, just that forward planning for me has been just a giant change in the way that I have to write menus. Usually you'd write a seasonal menu, but you're writing it a few weeks before you're changing that menu. At the moment, I'm sitting down with the 2 farmers that we've got coming on for spring and summer, and we're writing our summer menus at the moment because they need to be doing their crop plans and organising seeds, and so there's just so much more pre-thought and communication that needs to happen, which is what I think is falling apart with the restaurant supply chains side of things at the moment, because there's so many middlemen that are getting food from farms into inner city restaurants that we're not able to have that communication anymore. And, I'm hearing people saying, I don't really understand why this is this price here and this is this price there, but they can really never get back to the source to understand why those prices are increasing.
Yeah, it goes both ways, doesn't it? Because farmers don't see where their food ends up. And I know that, they put so much work into it, and then just that it just gets sort of disconnected from them and just goes into this system can be really demoralizing. I think especially when, there's so much food waste. Some of that's on farm, but a lot of that's at various points along the supply chain. I mean, I think it would be more enriching at both ends for people to, be able to have a continuous narrative of produce.
Yeah, certainly. Like, I really don't know well, I do know, but like where we went wrong in that fallout, and how we managed to put so many other people into that food system with logistics and getting things, from A to B. But sometimes, from food will go from a farmer to the market, from the market to the wholesaler, from the wholesaler to the restaurant. And, you've got 3 or 4 prices added on within that. And, in a restaurant environment, if you're getting an iceberg lettuce for $3 or $4 in your kitchen and it's already gone through 3 hands, like, it means that your farmers are probably getting 50 cents for something that was in their soil for 4 months. It doesn't add up. It's not okay. And I think, we need to really start trying to connect closer to our farmers and, reduce those middlemen as much as possible. And the ways to do that goes back to communication, reaching out to different people, reaching out to logistics companies. We've just set up a new system that we're going to trial for spring and summer for a couple of restaurants in the city with our farmers that work here. We found out that one of the seafood suppliers that comes down to the Mornington Peninsula every day comes down with a full truck of seafood, but they go back with an empty truck. So we're going to put our veg onto the truck, and it will get delivered to the 2 restaurants in the city. And, that was only through a few people sitting down and going, we want your produce. We want to get our produce too. How are we going to make that happen? And if you don't, just ask people and reach out, then it doesn't, things don't happen. But I think, I've got lots of other sort of ideas of ways in which city restaurants can get more direct access to produce. Down on the Mornington Peninsula, there is a lot of land down here, and a lot of it is quotation mark lifestyle properties. Now, lifestyle properties are essentially large properties that people have some form of agriculture on generally, but 9 times out of 10, that's to avoid land taxes. So it's pseudo agriculture that doesn't necessarily end up on people's plates, but a lot of people are trying to turn that around. And we've got large restaurant groups with multiple restaurants within the city all screaming at the price of food at the moment. With this idea that these farms could be subletting to restaurants, and rather than having 30 olive trees that are sitting there doing nothing, or 6 acres with 6 cows roaming around them so that they can avoid their tax, restaurants could be leasing space in areas like the Peninsula and the Yarra Valley to farm, hire a farmer, which will be a lot cheaper than buying $12 iceberg lettuces. And if you were supplying to multiple restaurants in the city, a small van, a logistics van that comes a couple of times of the week is not that hard to organise. So it's time to start thinking outside the box, I think.
I love that idea. I mean, I've got so many thoughts and questions, but it's sort of like empowered sharecropping in a way, where you just take this land that's not being used to its full potential. And I mean, maybe there's I think for individual restaurants to all start farming, I mean, we know that many restaurants have started with, a great glow in their hearts to grow their own herbs out the back. And, that can be a challenging enterprise for a very busy restaurant. But I think, to have this, a shared farmer. And actually there is I know of 1 or 2 restaurants that are doing that together, like Manze and Fenton Food and Wine in Melbourne are using shared land out just north of the city to grow their produce. And I know at least Fenton goes there once a week and sort of writes the menu depending on what's growing and what they pick. So I suppose there are people trying this. I mean, what do you think? Like, what about all the scale? I mean, we know why things are like this. It's because we decided that there were efficiencies at scale. There are so many of us, and we're not all, I guess, focused on feeding ourselves in a sustainable way. For a lot of people, food is a necessity and an afterthought, just something that they need to fuel to get, to do the next thing. I mean, what about, can you see a way of dealing with any of those big businesses, those multi-site businesses? I mean, do you feel like there are opportunities in that, or is it just, a big problem?
Well, yeah, look, I think the efficiencies in scale are actually the things that are starting to crumble, because, once upon a time, exactly what you're saying, to be able to grow things en masse was more cost effective. It was easier, to grow a whole plot of lettuce, or not a whole plot, acres and acres of lettuce. It uses the same fertilizer, the same machinery, and it all just is a lot easier. But then when a particular bacteria growth, a particular weather pattern, a particular pest or disease or what have you gets in that loves that iceberg lettuce, you lose all of your crop. And if we go back to what perhaps seems less efficient in some ways, it has more resilience in the long run if you've got biodiverse crops. And not only do you end up with more crops, then you don't have to deal with, sorry, lost my train of thought. You don't have to deal with taking like a bunch of different lettuces and things to only one place. You can distribute it to multiple levels.
Mm. Yeah, I think also you just made me think of a podcast, one of the Fish Tales podcasts on our sister podcast, which I love. So it was a chat with Russell Howe. And I mean, some of the stuff that he was talking about was around scale, and it was around how some of the big buyers can actually create really significant change simply through deciding where to put their money. And I mean, in some ways it made me feel sort of sad, that it was easier for, let's say, IKEA or Walmart to choose sustainable seafood than the restaurant down the road. But I suppose you think if the big money goes in better places, then, there has to be some sort of accountability and hopefully a trickle down to people who are just buying, 10 fish a week or whatever it is. And actually, speaking of fish, I've just written this story about restaurants and sustainability, and it'll be out the day after this podcast. So look out for that. One of the people I spoke to was Nick, who owns Fishbowl, which owns 30 restaurants for like quick service restaurants around the country. And they've just swapped from Tassie farmed salmon to New Zealand king salmon, which is, you know, has better sustainability credentials. It's going to cost them $1 million extra a year, but that's what they want to stand behind as a business. And I suppose you think, well, things done at scale, you know, there's still ways of doing things really well, even at scale. We're feeding all these many billions of us.
Yeah, look, I was actually just speaking to one of our veg suppliers this morning who buys veg office, and he was saying that like Woolworths and places like that were selling broccoli for $12 or $15 a kilo, and he's currently selling organic broccolis at $8 a kilo. And I think that goes back to sort of what I was getting at with the lettuce varieties, or having like one crop or a diverse crop, in that at the moment we're seeing some issues up north with weather patterns and lots of lettuce being completely wiped out because it's so wet. But then the organic growers, the organic broccoli growers and lettuce growers who have got a diverse amount of scale haven't lost everything, and therefore they're managing to keep their prices fairly regular. So, but, you know, I just thought it was interesting that a small-scale organic grower was managing to keep their prices lower than these so-called efficient large-scale operations.
That is so interesting. And I guess, you know, when you take it into food service, it's like people just need to have on the menu, you know, today's salad, not, you know, list out all the different leaves. And chefs need to be able to just, I guess, you know, roll with the idea of, you know, the salad or the side of veg, and be, you know, nimble enough to make it with whatever's available.
Yeah. Oh, look, you know, I think we're at a point in time where restrictive menu writing has to be the norm. And I think, you know, if we're putting things on our menu that are out of season, then 9 times out of 10, it's going to be something that's grown in a greenhouse pumped full of synthetic fertilizers and nonsense chemicals. And then we turn around and wonder why we've got viruses running through our staff and our family and our friends, you know, because we're not a very healthy society anymore. So, you know, I think that restrictive way of writing menus, of going, this is what I can get, this is at the price point that I'm in, and having the time to explain that to your diners or your family or whoever you're serving food to is really important. The story has to be there. And I think, you know, if you're able to explain to someone why something is more expensive, or why something's not on the menu today, then there has to be some empathy. We have to start appreciating that we can't have everything all the time. I think, you know, as Australians, we are so very privileged, but I think we've got our priorities a little bit wrong sometimes. You know, I so often hear people say, I'd love to grow my own food, but I don't have enough time, or organic food is too expensive. And I don't know, I think I'm calling bullshit on that for the most part. I think, you know, if you buy a coffee every morning, that's, you know, $25, $30 a week. That is 3 heads of organic broccoli. If you get your nails done once a fortnight, that's a full CSA organic box of veggies that could feed your entire family. And, you know, I'm not saying everyone's buying coffee or getting their nails done, but I think sometimes we spend too much money and time on those quick fix things, like, you know, just wine and coffee and fun and lavish things, when our health and reconnecting to the environment are so important. And, you know, if we're not going to make those small sacrifices and changes, then we've got to stop complaining about the price of iceberg lettuce.
Yeah, look, I love that gentle scolding, Simone.
That was as PC as I could make it.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And I'm sure, as much as you drive around the peninsula and see those fake farms, I'm sure if you, drive around the city and see lawns and, decorative plantings, then I'm sure you could see better uses for those as well.
Yes. I think, the urban nature strip, I love when you go up to Brunswick and you see, people have pulled out their nature strip and they've got, pomegranates and persimmons, or added that like double story to their garage so that they can grow some grapes. And like, it's not that hard. We've got to get over that silly aesthetic of nice green lawn and picket fence, and your front lawn can't possibly be for growing food. It has to be aesthetically beautiful, and pull out less agapanthus, more brassicas. That's my motto.
I love that. I think that is, I want to see that on a bumper sticker soon. Maybe on your van that is going to be, arriving with seafood and then leaving with vegetables and taking them to restaurants.
Yeah.
Simone, it's always so inspiring to catch up with you. I really appreciate, this part of your thinking around food and supply chains. It's really, it's really activating. I'm going to get some seeds. Thank you so much for planting thoughts, seeds, and all else that you do. Appreciate your time and your passion.
Thanks, Dani. You're welcome. Chat soon.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This